Death and creepypastas is something that is almost synonymous with the medium. I mean, let's think about a creepypasta story where somebody doesn't die. It's actually very rare, at least in my experience. And while I feel like death in any sort of facet is bad, especially if you're the one experiencing it, I feel like today, some of the things that we're going to be discussing, whether it be terrible fates or just horrific deaths in creepypasta, um, they go well beyond the point of being quick or even merciful deaths. And I believe that these are some of the fates that are in a league of their own when it comes to even creepypastas. So I will say some viewer discretion will be advised because I will be talking about certain topics that are a little, let's say, sensitive. Now, if you don't want to hear about that, that's fine. I'm going to put up some warnings when I'm going to talk about that type of stuff. I'm pretty sure it's only going to be one story. But regardless, I do want to be conscious about that. But regardless, let's get on with the video. Spelunking is a very dangerous activity to do already on its own. I mean, you're navigating through these claustrophobic, craggy passageways. You don't know what's in front of you because it's perpetually dark down there, and there's always the fear of hitting yourself on a stone or falling into some sort of pitfall that you didn't see in front of you. And whilst it is important to bring a group with you, you always have to have procedures no matter what. And that's the best thing about spelunking is that you can do it as a group, and the more people there is, the more chances of everybody being okay increases. But what if, even with all that gear and all that preparation, you forgot to factor in one thing? That's the cave. What if the cave doesn't want you to leave at all? The story of God's Mouth follows our protagonist Nathan and his girlfriend Margaret, who on a whim during a vacation decide to explore a cave that is locally known as God's Mouth. And while the name itself might already be sending off some alarm bells in some of your guys' brain, apparently it didn't for our dear protagonists. At first, the cave is like any other cave. It's dark, it's damp, and obviously it's quite scary. But there's some things that kind of make this cave start to already seem a little off, even from the beginning. The world behind them starts to seemingly disappear into blackness, and the stones that they touch feel less like cold, damp rocks and more like warm, rocky skin. And as they try to find their way in, they just keep getting more and more lost. But thankfully, they had a flashlight with them. Eventually, the space around them literally starts to close in, almost like the cave is encroaching on them, almost like a predator would on a prey. The walls start to become more narrow and almost impossibly tight, and the entrance is all but gone at this point. The endless rocks and corners and jagged pieces of stone start to slowly make their way in towards them, until eventually Nathan starts to hear something in the cave. It's Margaret, and she's screaming. He tries everything. He tries to look around, try to feel around the walls, and eventually at this point his flashlight starts working, and he ends up hitting himself in the head with a stone. Hours pass, and even at that point it's still suffocatingly quiet, and it's dark, and he can hear the walls closing in on them. Eventually, he gets his flashlight to work again, and that's when he sees it. He sees Margaret's hand being chewed up, painted in the same red fingernail polish that she had worn before they entered the cave. Almost as if God's mouth was chewing them, eating them, and becoming another piece of the cave that no one will ever find, ever again. Now, it should go without saying why God's mouth is in particular is a very terrible way to go out. Especially if you're already somebody who is claustrophobic or just is not fond of dark, cramped spaces. It's a place that, I mean, it's just completely on its own, spectrum of weirdness. Uh, you never really think of geological phenomenons being terrifying physical creatures, but here we are. And yeah, I mean, being crushed to death, in my opinion, is one of the worst ways that you could possibly go. I mean, ever. Right next to like drowning or, some sort of fire related death. And whilst we could say, and, a cave on its own is already very scary, and I agree with that, just the sheer thought of the cave having some form of sentience and hunger is just a terrible way to meet an end, especially given the fact that you are being pretty much grounded down by stalagmites or stalactites or whatever. And that's not to say what might happen to you if you somehow survive being crushed, or if you cling on to life just long enough. Maybe it'll digest you, maybe it just merges you into the walls itself, and it just sucks nutrients out of you. And who knows if God's mouth is actually a cave at all? Maybe it's some sort of creature that nestled into the side of a mountain or whatever. But we'll never know. And that's the terrible fate of God's mouth, and why I think it stands out amongst creepypasta deaths. Being crushed and just completely lost inside of this cave is an absolutely terrible way to go, especially if you're watching it happen to your significant other as well. There's something that is overly terrifying about people going missing. To me, it's something that just doesn't make sense sometimes. How somebody can be here one day and then the next they're just gone. And it's already a cause for concern when one person goes missing, and lots of towns and people come together in order to find these individuals. And sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. And it's those types of cases that always get under my skin. And it's already very harrowing when one person goes missing, but when an entire town comes up missing, that's a completely different story. On August 16th, 1952, the town of Ashley, Kansas ceased to exist. In the morning after its disappearance, it was preceded by a massive 7.9 magnitude earthquake. When the nearby police station of Hayes was sent out to investigate the situation, all they found in place of Ashley was a giant smoldering fissure that was hundreds of yards long. And where Ashley should have been was that fissure. They tried searching everywhere, and the roads that usually would lead to Ashley simply led to big open spaces where there was nothing. And some police officers even reported being sent back to the place that they started with no recollection. After 12 days of searching for all 679 residents of Ashley, Kansas, it was decided to postpone the search indefinitely, assuming that everybody from Ashley was dead. On August 30th, shortly after the search was called off to find the residents of Ashley, Kansas, another earthquake was felt in the exact same spot as where the town was. When police officers showed up to investigate the situation, the fissure that was once there was now completely closed, as if nothing had ever been there to begin with. Now, it may seem odd that this might have just happened with no preamble. However, several days before the actual disappearance, a lot of the residents of Ashley, Kansas called in to report strange happenings going on in the town. August 8th, 1952. Dozens of phone calls come in from Ashley reporting that a black opening was seen over the skies of the small town. No other township nearby reported such an occurrence. August 10th, 1952. Calls come in from Ashley, Kansas reporting that the sun had never risen in the town and that it was enveloped in complete darkness. August 11th. One of the residents reported that her daughter had been reportedly speaking with her deceased father. Over the next 12 hours, 329 calls were made about the children in the town communicating with dead relatives. August 12th, 1952. All of the children in the town vanish, leading to over 400 emergency calls being made by the panic stricken parents. August 13th, 1952. Scott Luntz, a resident of Ashley, called in reporting that there was a giant distant fire that was turning the black sky orange. Many other calls chimed in, also reporting that fire was falling from the sky. The final call to come out of Ashley, Kansas was on August 15th, 1952. The call came from a female resident named April Foster, reporting that the dead of the town had returned with the fire, and that she saw her deceased son walking down the street with severe burns. It is also reported that many people opened their homes to these flaming dead relatives, in which some homes caught fire and others were full of screaming. Since then, there were no more calls made from Ashley, Kansas. And up until now, everybody that lived in the town is still missing. Like I mentioned earlier, when somebody does go missing or they vanish, it is a cause for concern. Sometimes it happens because of bad actors, or sometimes people just go missing for personal reasons. They don't want to be found. But whenever it comes to an entire population just completely going and just vanishing, there is a very big cause for concern, obviously. And we could see this as one of the most terrible fates that could ever befall anybody, particularly people that would live in this town. Having to just kind of live in this pocket dimension where things aren't the same on the outside, because you're obviously in somewhere completely different from the normal world, and the fact that they're still able to communicate with the outside world via telephone. I don't know how that works, but still, it just adds to the hopelessness. Obviously you can call out, but nobody's coming to save you. And it's obviously implied from what we can tell from the story with the fire and the darkness, is that they probably fell in some sort of hellish pocket dimension. And this story really reminds me of those voices from that one hole, Russian hole, drill hole, whatever it was, where they trumped that microphone in there and all they heard was screaming. That's what this story really reminds me of. And just thinking about the story in conjunction with that, audio is kind of what leads me to believe this would be one of the most worst fates ever. Obviously, the audio has nothing to do with it, but still, having to come face to face with the reality that you are probably going to die whilst being confronted by these flaming undead relatives of yours is just horrible, because we don't know what happened. Obviously, we hear from the lady at the end, April, that some people just open their doors, to their relatives, probably because they're overjoyed to see them, but still, most likely a lot of them ended up dying, whether that's because, the relatives had other plans, or, they just caught on fire. And to me, the most terrifying aspect of this story, and why I think it's one of the worst ways to go, is because you probably wouldn't know what the hell's going on at all, especially given how confusing it is in the beginning, where it's just things are just going wrong. There's no sun, there's something in the sky, and then this massive fire. I would have died of shock by then. But anyways, yeah, tell me what you think. Would you be able to make your way out of Ashley? I know that somebody in the story actually did, but the road took them nowhere. So, yeah. One of the most fascinating aspects of just being alive is the fact that we are surrounded by trillions and trillions of miles of outer space. And you could ask somebody if they think that other life exists, and you'll probably get a 50-50 split of people saying that we're the only life out here, or that there's more life out in outer space, they're just really far away. And both of those answers are equally as terrifying. If we're alone, what happened to the rest of the life in the universe? Or if we are surrounded by life on other planets, what's taking them so long to respond to us? Maybe what we're attributing to just dead silence is actually other civilizations' attempts to stay quiet and to fade into the background. Because there's something out there in the universe looking for life. And maybe, just maybe, they don't want to meet that thing. And in the story, The Quiet Sky, we get to see what that hypothetical situation might look like if one day we call out to the stars and something responds. We spent years calling out to the stars, and then something finally answered. At first, it wasn't through radios or through computers. Instead, it was a voice inside of everyone's head, asking,
Who is there?
and then
Where are you?
in every human language, even the deaf could hear it. This caused the world to erupt into chaos. People were split. They thought that it was their respective gods speaking to them. Others claimed that it was aliens. Some even said that it whispered personal secret messages to them. But they were all wrong. This wasn't contact with some sort of friendly life form. It was something beyond that. It was something incomprehensible, and something that could even be seen as malevolent. People began to call it the voice. And then the rest of the world began to react also. First, it seemed as if the ground was moaning and groaning. Then, graveyards began to scream. All the dead, even every animal, every ancient form of life began to scream. They stirred in tortured cries and called out to something. And then the screaming stopped, all at once, leaving a sickening silence. And then the voice could be heard again,
I hear you.
followed by a promise that chilled everybody.
I am coming.
After the voice delivered its message, the world plunged into hysteria. Millions panicked, riots broke out, and people died in the streets. The world as we knew it was coming undone. But that was only the beginning of the horrors. The sky started to change. Sections of space started to become completely black, surrounded by stars that appeared to bleed red light. Every night, it grew larger, spreading across the sky like ink in water. And as all of this was going on, animals vanished without a trace. There were no bodies, there were no tracks, there was no explanation as to why all of these creatures were disappearing. Communication systems started to fail. Satellites fell out of orbit, and radios and phones went silent. Strange rain fell, salty and filthy, blackening everything that it touched, from the grass to the world itself. And then slowly, daylight started fading until the world started growing dimmer and grayer. Some people even started reporting seeing ghostly white figures, tall and pale. They looked like they were creatures made out of complete sorrow, only seen briefly before disappearing, or before people can even fully register them. Even faith was not a refuge. Churches and temples, places that were sacred, burned, and people who sought shelter inside, they were merged to the walls of these temples, bounded like insects on paper, their pleas forever frozen on their face. And then a final message came from beyond the sky. There was a darkness beyond the horizon, the likes of which I doubt has ever been seen. It brings with it screams of countless souls, and it moves fast. The stars are dying now, and I know they'll never be seen again. The light is dying so fast. The universe is infinite, and our understanding was significantly more finite. We should have never beckoned to the darkness. Instead, we should have clung on to the light and closed our eyes every time we returned to the void. As the final minutes approach, I hold one final truth to be certain. I know why the skies were always so quiet. So I know that cosmic horror isn't something that I really touch on this channel, but it's actually one of my most favorite kind of horrors. I mean, just something that is so truly captivating about not knowing what is actually coming after you, you know. And this is a good story that represents that fear that I have in whole. And this story, I kind of summarized it. I didn't really read out. I cut out some of the parts in it, but I kept the good bits. This story has a really good way of kind of conveying the feeling that somebody would have in this exact same scenario. Like if we were in this scenario, I feel like a lot of people would share the sentiment that the protagonist in the story did. It just feels like there's a whole lot of despair going on in the story through the character's perspective alone. And this, to me, it is one of the worst things that could ever happen, you know, fate wise. Obviously, the deaths and such would be terrible, but I mean, just leading up to it and what comes afterwards is terrifying. This thing is, whatever this thing is so massive and it's so encompassing that it literally just swallows up stars. And it is able to communicate even with people that probably have never heard a voice before. And on top of that, even things that are dead are able to hear this thing and they start crying out for it. I probably would have, I don't know what I would have done, okay? But the fact that creatures, you know, animals and the like, are just disappearing, man, that part kind of got to me because, I mean, could you imagine having pets and then they're just gone? But yeah, I mean, it's terrifying. And I mean, that's probably why a lot of civilizations out there are so quiet. That's probably why they don't talk to us. They know something that we don't. Or that's probably the reason why we haven't heard anything from them either. They're gone. Something completely swallowed up their civilizations and we don't even know. And a lot of the things that we might attribute to black holes or whatever, it could just be something like this, just going around and just swallowing things up without even noticing. And who knows? Maybe something already has, you know, heard us or caught a glimpse of us and it's making its way over here, and that's why we're seeing these far off black holes. And who God knows what's going to happen if it gets here, if it ever does happen. But like I said, it goes without saying, one of the worst ways for anything to end, in my opinion. Definitely top three, you know, cataclysms of this. This is the LeBron of apocalypses, in my opinion. So, it's been a while, guys. Almost a year, and I'm sorry about that. I really am. I just had a lot going on in my life with my move and such, and I finally am in a headspace and also an actual space where I can actually record and do all my stuff. And what does this mean for the future of the channel? What does this mean for, you know, myself? Um, Honestly, I needed a break like this because I was getting really close to being burnt out. I mean, I would make videos and they wouldn't do very good, and I'm not really a person that is. I don't expect to become a super big YouTuber by any stretch of the imagination, but I like doing this. I really do. And if a video is successful, then I'm happy because people are actually willing to watch my content. But I had to kind of step away from it because it started becoming this kind of competition of whether or not I could actually keep this stuff up. And I just kept disappointing myself, so I said, you know what? I just need a break. And it did wonders for me. It really did. It allowed me to come up with some ideas, and I have plenty of ideas coming up. I will try to actually start releasing videos a little bit more regularly now that I have a place where I can actually record now. I had to make a bit of sacrifice when it comes to making these. I actually am not in my usual rig. I actually had to build a completely separate computer and find somewhere where I could record. So I'm actually not in my new home right now. So, but I have found a way to circumvent this. So not a big deal. But anyways, yeah, I am going to be doing, you know, some new content. I will be trying to kind of stretch out the way I edit videos and stuff. stretch my legs. I mean, and hopefully you guys like it. But anyways, yeah, guys, I appreciate anybody who's watching this right now. I really do. And like I said, hopefully I can start to make videos a little bit more regularly now that I am a bit more situated and not as, not beating myself up if the video is not doing so good. I'm just gonna let it do its thing. But regardless, I am happy to be back, and I will be releasing content here and on Mega OK. If you're not subscribed to Mega OK, please, if you do like my content, subscribe to Mega OK. That's where I will be doing some more freeform content, and it is a place where I will be collaborating with friends and stuff. So you get to see a little bit more of varied content and everything. But regardless, I am happy to be back, and I'm happy to be making content for you guys. And I'm going to try to keep it up and try to keep it fresh as usual. And that's all I got to say. I appreciate you guys. If you watched all the way to the end, I really do. And yeah, love you guys. Thank you so much for sticking around this long. And I will catch you in the next video. Take care and be safe.
You got that thing oiled down?
Oiled down?
Yeah, did you get it oiled out?
Wait, hold up. You're talking about the oil change?
Yeah.
Why didn't you just say that? I mean, what the fuck, Cell? Every time I come here, you always gotta take me through this homosexual rigmarole, man. With your terminology, man. What the fuck is wrong with you, Cell? Like, just come over, man. Just finish cutting my hair so I can get the fuck up out of here.
I got you.